Welcome, everyone. I'm grateful to be here for this webinar, How the Pandemic Changed Leaders for the Better, to highlight findings from the Institute of Coaching's report, Leading with Humanity, the Future of Leadership and Coaching. Summing up the last 2 years in one word is easy: disruption. Between the pandemic itself and a surge of social unrest, especially in the US, our work and personal lives were turned upside down, taking a major toll on our psychological well-being. But what was the result of that? How did we rally, pivot, and adapt? What does that mean for our collective future? And how can coaching help create the right leaders and ensure organizational resilience for the future? A group of 19 IOC fellows wanted to find out. They interviewed 33 executives in 5 countries, all of whom were invited to reflect on what they've experienced and learned about leadership and the role of coaching in leadership. What this led to is a venerable treasure trove of firsthand accounts of the impact of pandemic-era disruptions on organizations, leaders, leadership, and leadership coaching, and the valuable insights of leaders around the world shaping a post-pandemic future. I'm thrilled to have Margaret Moore, aka Coach Meg, co-founder and chair at the IOC, the project lead editor, and co-author, here to shed more insights from this collection of interviews. Coach Meg brings more than 20 years of experience as an executive coach and entrepreneurial leader. After 17 years as a biotech executive for global companies, she founded Well Coaches Corporation, a school of coaching for health professionals that trained 14,000 coaches in 15 countries since 2000. In 2009, she co-founded the Institute of Coaching with Carol Kaufman. In 2010, she co-founded the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching to establish coaching standards, coach certification, and healthcare reimbursement of health and well-being coaching services in the US. Coach Meg is co-author of 3 books, 8 book chapters, and 20 peer-review articles on coaching, and co-director of the Coaching in Leadership and Healthcare Conference offered by Harvard Medical School since 2008. Welcome, Meg. We are so thrilled to have you join us today.
Well, thank you, Rach, for this amazing opportunity. I'm just overflowing with excitement to be able to share this report. It's in many ways, it's kind of basic and banal, and it's also deeply profound. And so I'm looking forward to engaging with it and with you.
Wonderful. Well, let's dive in. This report is titled Leading with Humanity. What does that mean?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that those interviews with 33 executives, which was hundreds of pages, all got deconstructed into short sound bites and then reconstructed into the report, into something that we could all use. And what came out of all that data, what spoke through all those voices, is this sense that humanity got a promotion in organizational life. And, we thought about titling it Leading with Humanity or Leading for Humanity. And we landed on leading with humanity. But I also want to say that I think this is a stepping stone toward leading for humanity. And we didn't write about this in the report, but there's a wonderful new Harvard Business Press book called Humanocracy. And Humanocracy, the basic premise is that rather than humans serving organizations, which creates bureaucracy, we have organizations serving humans. And if you really stand back, everything we do in organizational life is ultimately serving humans, whether it's collecting taxes to distribute them, making bicycles so you can get around, Band-Aids. I mean, everything we do is for humans. And so in the end, we are leading for humanity, but I don't think that is actually where most people are at in terms of worldview. So we went with leading with humanity.
I love that. I love that you said humanity got a promotion. Humanity has been long overdue for a promotion. For many people in the workforce reading this report, they would say the changes noted in this report are long overdue. For others, these are brand new revelations. Can you speak to why organizations are primed now more than ever before to do the hard work outlined in this report?
Yes, so the hypothesis that came out of the data when you put it all together was that, and I know this isn't always obvious because as leaders, our role is to create strategy and goals and get everybody on board, to co-lead, to join in, to follow, right? And so because it's results focused, we tend, when we're looking at people, I mean, like really just looking at them, we tend to see through them. And I'm an MBA. I'm guilty of this as much as anyone. You see through people to the result you want. So you don't see people first. You look through them to what you want as a leader. And I think because of the abrupt shock and the immense human suffering, you as a leader, you couldn't just see through the task because you're looking at people who are completely distraught and upset and worried, and their lives are, have completely been turned upside down. Our relationship with our future, everyone's future, is completely unknown. So you can't miss the human condition in that situation. And so what the algorithm that sort of came clear, not to everybody, but the folks, came out in our interviews, is that if you, in fact, attune first and see people and attempt to understand what they need and what they want and where they are and what is next, that if you do that really, really well, they will go with you on this crazy journey through a crisis, which means a ton of change, a ton of disruption. And the data that's organizations don't change very easily, and many change initiatives fail, and that you can't afford to have that happen in a crisis. You've got to get everybody moving towards a productive change. And so if you lean in and really be with humans, be with people as they are, they will then come with you. And so the focus on the individual's needs and resilience ultimately, in lots of ways, is the driver of organizational resilience. And the folks we talked to saw that with their own eyes and lived that way. And I don't think that was so obvious before, that the way organizations become resilient is by intentionally and genuinely focusing on the human needs first.
Oh, thank you for that. I want to acknowledge that there are so many insightful takeaways in this report. I know I had to read it twice. For you, Meg, if there was one and only one takeaway to walk away with, what would you hope readers would take away from this report?
Yeah, thank you. We endeavored to connect the data, the interview pieces, to the literature. And interestingly, right around this time, there's been kind of more expanded view of a framework called compassionate leadership. And there's a lot of leadership frameworks out there, as you know, it's hard to keep track of them all. But I think this one really spoke to us as the one that kind of summed up where we are. There's a quote, and I'm going to read some of the quotes to bring this alive. And we opened the report with this, which is that we haven't been human enough. The pandemic is providing us with an opportunity. This came from a leader in the audit and tax world. I want to then read to you from a study, 2019, on compassionate leadership, defining it and showing that it leads to more productivity, better performance, more retention, because I think it says it all. So basically, compassionate leaders set themselves apart because they come from a place of integrity and presence. Within that space of integrity and presence, they're awake. They're keenly aware of how their actions affect others and how they influence and actively shape the experience for everyone. They're acutely self-aware of what they're doing, how they're behaving, what they're thinking. And then they take action in a way that honors the experience of everyday experiences of work of every employee. and that this way of being, and this you're still transforming, you're still innovating, you're still tough with folks, you're still moving things forward, but you're wrapping it in this beautiful sort of compassionate space. And that space has a spillover effect. It encourages others to act compassionately toward each other. And that leads to positive work cultures, more learning, reduced dysfunction, less like better dealing with conflict, less incivility. And that, the all of this leads to better performance. And so leading with one's heart is not weak. It's actually the way to frame and hold the toughness. And so I think it's not that you're not tough, not that you're not focused on change and disruption and peak performance, but it's very authentically held in a compassionate space.
That's beautiful. Can you tell us one of the most interesting revelations among leaders during the pandemic that surprised you most when it came to organizations meeting human needs?
Well, I would say that this is one that I've watched for a long time that I didn't know when it would change. And this is how organizations view employee well-being, or, wellness. It used to be employee wellness was the main term. And, in my career, employee wellness has been for most organizations a sideline, an afterthought, a line in the HR budget. We've taken care of employee wellness. We've got gym, we've got whatever, right? And not considered a strategic priority that drives performance and competitive advantage. And while all of us who've been seeing leadership and well-being as one thing, most leaders haven't. Maybe they've gotten more interested in their own, peak performance and physical fitness and stuff, but there just hasn't been enough attention paid. And what again was right in front of people's eyes. So if you were alert, you couldn't miss it. It turns out that when everything shut down, people weren't getting social connection, social collaboration. They needed enough meaning to keep them above water with these waves of crises. And it turned out that work was an important, if not critical, contributor to employee well-being, because it provided social connection when you didn't have it. It provided a means of working together for the greater good. Like, how do we keep afloat? How do we keep ourselves afloat and others afloat? And then how do we have productive relationships that are nourishing? And then how do we take care of each other because we're all distraught? And so we began to realize that work a home for generating well-being. And then we watched people in their homes struggling with being first grade teachers and worrying about their aging parents. And then we wanted to really support their well-being. So we realized that their well-being at home was hugely impactful on their work, and the well-being at work was hugely impactful on their overall well-being. And so we all began to realize it's all one thing. Well-being at work or home, it's all one thing. And so that meant that well-being got an upgrade in corporate life. It became first to mind. And, as everybody's thinking about maybe someday we go back to the workplace, if we don't have another, 6 or more, how many ever variants that come, I think more and more, not everyone, but more and more leaders are realizing they have to bake in the individual needs for well-being into the way they design work and the workplace. I think that had not been grounded to the extent that it is now.
Thank you for sharing that as someone who found themselves as a kindergarten teacher on top of being an employee. That definitely resonates. In chapter 3, the report noted leaders shift their values. Can you share why values are so critical to leading with humanity, and why so many leaders value change over the last 2 years?
Yeah. So first thing to say is that the concept of values-based leadership is really not only 20, maybe 20 years old.
Mm.
And it came out of the dreadful corruption and fraud and wrong WorldCom, and so this idea that if you're going to you want your followers to trust you, you've got to come from a place where the important things are understood and matter. Now, alongside that, the literature shows, and everybody I think would agree, that values don't shift much over a lifetime. Very little, actually, which means that they get established early in life, right? And so as parents, we're extremely, critical in getting that started on the right footing. So they don't change very quickly, and not easy to change. So you bring in a pandemic, which rocked and shook and, rattled everybody. So we're all kind of released from our moorings. And then you start to say, oh my gosh, who am I? What's important? What am I doing? And so what you heard in these interviews is this shift in values. And we mapped it to something called the Schwartz values model that has a 4-quadrant makeup. And they're all important, but the bottom 2 have probably been overused. And they are self-enhancement, which is achievement and power, because you have to have ambition and drive as a leader. You don't get there without a good amount of life force. And then conformity, like stability, which means 9 to 5. Everybody's at the office, everybody does this, everybody travels this way, everybody. So we have rules, everybody conforms. Okay. So what you heard in the voices was the shift to the top 2, which are self-transcendence, so greater good, benevolence, more awareness of the impact on society, and just taking into account instead of just the blinded focused on task and results. And then the other one is openness to the constant change that's happening, except it's been even magnified in the last couple of years. So basically a balancing out of the self-orientation and the let's keep things stable and follow the rules and do things the way we know it's worked always, to, okay, let's change what we need to change, and let's really focus on the benevolence, the humanness.
Thank you. Later in the report, it's noted the intense traumatic experience of being a leader during the pandemic was not wasted. How would you describe the most impactful changes that you have seen in leaders in the last 2 years?
So I've spoken to some of the changes already. So I think the one I would like to bring up now, and we touched on it in noting that, if you're going to lead with humanity, then you have to greet humanity. You have to, say hello to it, be with it, welcome it, create psychological safety, as Amy Edmondson would say, for it to appear and be there. The next step is, and I think those of you, all of you in the HR field, we tend to talk about emotional intelligence, social intelligence, communication skills, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think we pay enough attention to the idea of relationships. Like not the teamwork, but the first thing I create with people individually and groups is a relationship. And it's a different kind of relationship from my family and my friends. It's completely different because it is going somewhere. And in that way, our work relationships can be some of our closest and richest relationships that we have. And thankfully, we live in a time when we are acknowledging that. So I think the taking time to intentionally make a relationship with someone that lasts and that can handle the ups and downs of difficult moments and conflicts. And, it's got to be a really good relationship, right? If you're going to, just like a marriage, right? If you're going to put a lot of pressure on it, it's going to have a lot of, core strength. So I think the focus on having relationships and that as a cursor, and all that emotional intelligence and social intelligence, communication skills, those are just the enablers. The real thing is having relationships. And I think that is incredibly meaningful. And, as we watch this wave of resignations, you can't help but wonder whether there would be fewer if work was a place for real, long-term relationships.
Absolutely. Can you talk about what that human-centered relationship really looks like in structure? If I'm a leader, how would I know if I'm being a human-centered leader? How would I know if I'm missing the mark?
Yeah, I'm gonna draw on a quote here, Rach, because I think it says it well, and then I can build on that. There's actually two quotes I've got here. The first one's from a healthcare leader. The real secret to leadership goes back to showing empathy, building safety, building teamwork, where people can show up and be vulnerable. The pandemic really exposed leaders who were uncomfortable doing that, because if you hid behind numbers, if you hid behind only like management approaches, if you were uncomfortable creating safe spaces for people to be themselves, to truly open up, there's no way there's any chance against COVID, because it exposed cultures that were based on fear, meet the numbers or bad things will happen. These cultures based on fear were based on top-down management. When you were just chasing metrics, that didn't work, because there was no map, there was no guide, there was no path, there was no protocol, no process for COVID. You actually had to trust each other. And so that, I think, speaks to creating the space where relationship can be. And so that would be the first thing. And then the other thing I want to quote is from the audit and tax leader. It's a very interesting blend of things that are required now. On the one hand, a collaborative style of leadership, hearing every voice in the room and making people feel heard, ensuring you are taking diverse views into opinion. I feel we need to be in a position of taking a range of views and nevertheless being decisive. So what this means is you don't give up on the importance of making the right decisions and doing the right work, but you add to that the space for people to show up as they are, and to welcome that. And when you do that, then you have more trust. And then and if you collaborate more and you invite more input, they feel like, people feel like they're part of something. And so I think that's a good way of kind of summarizing human-centered leadership. We're not taking our eye off the ball in terms of getting phenomenal results. But what we're doing is doing it in a different way.
Follow-up question to that would be, as coaches, we know people have blind spots. And human-centered leadership is definitely a blind spot for a lot of folks. So is there a litmus or some indicators that someone who's listening here today might go back and say, oh, that's a clue, I'm not taking that human-centered approach?
I think so. If you know Carl Jung's cognitive functions, there's thinking, there's feeling, there's sensing, and there's intuiting. Mm-hmm. And the two things that we use, the main thing we use at work is thinking. Mm-hmm. And the mind is basically then stuck up here. Mm-hmm. It's just sits there all day long until your brow is furrowed, the lines start appearing, your headache starts to feel, you actually have soreness in your forehead from the thinking. Okay, so that's where we live. It's in this achievement culture. Almost everybody is overusing thinking. When you're connecting with another person, just even for like a few seconds, you're attuning. And there's cognitive empathy, But if you don't have the emotional empathy, if you're not attuning to what's their real state, are they distressed? Are they struggling? Are they good? If you're not attuning to their, because the emotions, thank God, have gotten also a big upgrade in the scientific literature in the last decade. Emotions are produced by the brain to give you a message that you need to listen to and learn from. They're not, they're incredibly valuable data. And they're data that you can only pick up if you're in your attuning space too. If you're thinking, you're not going to pick it up. So I think when I'm coaching, this is the simple way I explain it. Move your mind out of your forehead and down into your heart and attune just for a few seconds. Just attune, be there for a few seconds. Don't think about the next thing. And when you're fully present then and you're attuning, people can feel it. Because I work a lot in healthcare, a physician-patient, a nurse-patient interaction can be completely transformed by 2 or 3 seconds of attuning. I see you, I feel you, you're here, I'm with you. You're human, I'm human, we're here together. So that, I think if you're not doing a lot of that during the day, you want to diversify the way you use your brain and try that out.
I love that. And I hope everyone listening can take that one activity to feel if they're getting the stress lines and move down into attuning. I will definitely do that as well. Okay, so let's shift now to one of my favorite parts of the report, the 5 fundamentals of humanity. Can you share with our audience what these 5 fundamentals are and why leaders and organizations need to embrace them?
Yes, great. And I really want to emphasize this came out of the voices of the leaders. We did not impose this. This is what emerged. And when you read the report, you will see just how the quotes provided this structure. Okay, so the first thing, which we haven't yet really talked about, is expanding consciousness. Awareness, depending, you might prefer the word awareness, I like the word consciousness, because I think, part of being a human over your lifetime is expanding your consciousness. And it starts with a consciousness about yourself, about the other person, about the team, dynamic, and about the larger culture. That in order to be conscious, you have to create space. And you have to notice and observe. You have to zoom out to that, balcony view or meta view, as we call it, so that you can actually look at yourself more objectively with more kind of strategic breadth and depth. And so that, I think that awakening, some of these words, nothing I'm saying is new, right? Nothing I'm saying is new. It's just that I think we're deepening these fundamentals. Here's a quote. The pandemic really called on a deep awakening of asking myself why I became a leader. It challenged me to the deepest core. It opened up my eyes to really drive myself to think about who I was and why I'm here. Okay, so that's awakening. And you got to spend time, whether you do mindfulness practice, whether you journal, whatever you do, you have to stand back and notice. And get out of your head. So this is actually the sensing and the intuition. Like consciousness comes to you. It's not something you think about. So that's another way to diversify your mind. Okay, so that's the first one, expanding conscious. There's 5. The second, which I've already explored, which is focus on relationships. And what I think it's worth adding at this point is that relationships come from authenticity, by showing who you are. And for a leader, that meant showing just enough vulnerability, not too much, so people got worried that you're falling apart and you're not a good leader, but just showing enough so that you're human while not shaking people's confidence in your ability to lead. That's a very delicate balance. So let's listen to some of the voices here. We were humanized by seeing their homes and kids. Our leaders, we mean well. We care for them as people. We've got good intentions. However, prior to COVID, we were not very sensitive to what was going on in their lives. And then This is from a venture capital leader, not what you might expect, at least in my experience with venture capitalists in my biotech career. The kind of trust that is built as a result of the honesty during a moment like this is unprecedented. Every touch point with our employees and customers is an opportunity to elevate our relationships. People now see their primary job as maintaining the health of relationships, their teams, customers, important ecosystem partners, supply channels. It's become about over-communicating, touching base, seeing that not everything is about progressing the business and about a cohesive strategy and narrative. We need to focus on maintaining relationships, which will ultimately benefit the business. So that's a shift. I can tell you from my experience with the venture capital world, putting relationships first. That's a real shift as opposed to numbers and making money. The third one, which I've also already talked about, is to support well-being. And I want to add here that what we heard in their voices is how important self-care is, because a crisis demands more from you than everyday life, although I don't know whether we're ever going to go back to everyday life. So in order to be fit, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually fit for crisis, you've got to put time into self-care. And that means everybody does. And so the organization needs to really genuinely support that your self-care is important to us, really important, not because we're trying to squeeze you like a juicer to get more out of you, but because it's what's going to give you the capital, the individual, the social, the psychological capital to support you. And then the other part of well-being I want to point out is that we collectively have been traumatized, because a trauma, not necessarily a big trauma, many of us have had big traumas in terms of grief and loss, but the trauma of having your future so disrupted personally and collectively is still a trauma. And the post-traumatic growth construct, where you suffer well, you step in and through the trauma, you be with the suffering, you are compassionate to yourself and others, leads to, just by doing it well, growth in meaning, opportunities, strength, relationships, and confidence. So realizing that part of the well-being process is to turn the trauma into growth. So I wanted to raise those two. Now, the next thing, which I haven't touched on that much, is the diversity issue, integrating diversity. Just like we began to see well-being as this whole thing, work drives well-being, home drives well-being, together you create well-beings. Diversity and inclusion and equity got real. They're not just check boxes, they got real. And this is a quote from a robotics executive. I think about how the George Floyd murder has impacted us individually and collectively across the world, and how it may be what allowed us to actually feel, be more empathetic, and maybe a bit more introspective. I think it helped us in our practice of being empathetic to our employees when they're going through this shelter in place. Now we had another way to apply that empathy and understanding. And there's something there that's really profound. And then here's another, challenge with truly seeking diverse opinions and welcoming diverse perspectives. You're going to get conflicting views, right? And conflicting information is not just conflicting in the sense that the input makes it harder to make your decision. It also creates anxiety and uncertainty because different people are reacting to circumstances differently. In an organizational context, we were spending a lot of our time trying to be empathetic to that, which means as soon as you welcome diversity, you're going to get different views and it's going to be uncomfortable. And so you want to create a culture where it's okay to have different perspectives. People are not made wrong or judged, that they're welcomed and that they get integrated into the whole. And then the last, which is really the outcome, and that's the big point of this study, is that all of this, the expanding your consciousness, cultivating relationships every day, supporting well-being, integrating diversity, enables an agile culture. And an agile culture, and of course there are, there's agile, right? There's agile practices, there's agile cultures, there's training. Lots of companies are adopting this sort of nimble, fast-moving, fast-pivoting approach where people are empowered, they take ownership, they're agile and resilient, and all of the things I just talked about are in fact the enablers of agile outcomes, of agile cultures. And to quote what we said in the report, organizations are not machines. They're living, breathing communities made up of human beings with all the messiness of being human in relationships, not simply mechanistic entities with a focus on results and the bottom line. The basic principles of a human-centered approach, and they're basic, none of this is new. It's just deep and profound when it's done well. These principles will generate the energy and innovation that we need to work through the biggest problems and challenges of our times. So those are the 5.
That's incredible, and such an important set of fundamentals for leaders to embrace. So thank you. For those leaders who are not yet embracing what you shared today, how did they get started? You touched on a few areas, but what are some others and how they can get started?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons that we spent almost 1,000 hours of people hours went into this report. So, we really leaned in here because we wanted it to be helpful. And so one thing is that the report is in itself a catalyst because, we walk through the experience of 2020, which was pretty yucky. Most of us have moved on. We don't want to look back, but just like, reading through and reliving it a little bit can help us reflect on, wow, how did this impact me and my approach to leadership? So, what have I already learned and gained from this? And how do I, really, harvest that? So I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing, and, I'm speaking as a coach here, understand where you are and where you've come from, and what's good and how you've grown, because everyone's grown from this. Obviously not everyone. We have had a great increase in suicide, and so there's definitely been huge cost. But a lot of people are still in the trauma. But what we want to then do as leaders is give ourselves an honest rating on how we're doing. And if you just take these principles of, how are you doing in terms of expanding your consciousness and seeing your blind spots and getting around them? How are you doing in terms of the quality of relationships and trust, your support of, well-being, inclusion, collaboration, and how agile and resilient is your organization? So just take a good hard look at that and decide, how am I doing? And then lean in to change yourself and move yourself in this direction. And this is where a coach is invaluable as a partner, because a blind spot is a blind spot, which means you can't see it. Your worldview is your worldview. You're stuck in that box. And so the way to grow yourself is to see your blind spots, get around them, and expand your worldview, diversifying it, expand your repertoire. And it's darn difficult to do that by yourself, and when you get feedback from people, it's usually meant with good intentions, but it's not complete. It's not often actionable. And so getting the partner of a coach is really helpful. And the last thing to say about coaching is that all of you who are coaches will have seen this all the way through. Everything we're saying here is what are the principles of coaching. This is what coaches do. Everything here is coaching. And so I think it's an opportunity to recognize that our skill set as coaches is the skill set for leadership needed now. So we don't have to change what we do. We just need to be even more explicit. Okay, I'm developing a relationship with you as a client that's meaningful, that's got a purpose, that's going to take us somewhere. My job is to help you expand your awareness of yourself and others, to get past your blind spots, to get focused on your values and to use those well, to be an authentic leader, to be compassionate, to diversify your perspectives, on and on and on. This is what we do as coaches. So the coaching, space is exactly what this, and we didn't, that's what the data said. We didn't come into this report as coaches and say, we want to prove that coaching is the model for the times. What we got is that's what the data showed us. And then we find ourselves as coaches as really the skill set designed for this human-centered approach.
So thank you so much. And I just want to recap, because you said some really important things in that sort of, I'll call it your 3-step process. What have I learned and harvested? How have I grown? Give an honest rating. I think that's so hard for so many leaders. So really sitting with that discomfort there, and then leaning into the change. And I love how you share how coaches can support that. And so not to belabor that question, but in terms of the role that coaching has in this transformation of leaders as we move forward into 2022, is there anything else that you want to highlight or share?
How much time do we have? Yeah, we want to leave a little time. So I think I wanted to say something about authentic leadership, but I'm gonna skip that. We can come back to that. I'm going to read a quote from a healthcare leader on the role of a coach, because, again, these voices say it for us. The ability to simplify in the middle of complexity, inspire when there's no hope, building relationships when there is distrust, building bridges when things have fragmented, helping people change when people don't want to change. All those skills are not in the technical manual. And those skills start with self-awareness and having very open conversations about your own derailers, your own strengths, your own opportunities. That's where I think a formal coach on a consistent basis makes a transformational difference. Coaching is essential to the journey of being a leader. It's not an option. It's who you are that's going to be part of your transformation and the folks that you work with as humans. It's a gift for anybody who can participate. For me, it's made me a better father, a better husband, a better human being, and a better leader. And so that shows, how fundamental helping yourself grow and finding a partner to do that is the call of being a leader. And when you model growth, people have more hope in the future, because if you're growing and changing and they see that you're doing things differently and that you've become a bigger, wiser, better person, that's actually really helpful to people you lead. So I think that we're all, I think the organizational life is on a trajectory towards more human-centered leadership, with all the ups and downs and lots of backward steps, lots of organizations not doing it. But I think that is, if you think about this as a big, a nonlinear system, the organizing principle that we're heading towards is more humanity. Okay, so as a leader, you can choose to get ahead of that and accelerate your own growth so that you're staying with it, or it's going to catch up to you and you'll be forced to go in that direction. And I think the great resignation is the forcing factor for a lot of people, because if you're the person who's the leader of organizations that people are leaving because they're not getting their needs met, they're not feeling cared about, they're not feeling as though this culture is actually good for them, healthy for them. They notice that their blood pressure is going up. They notice that they're not eating well. They notice that they're on an unhealthy track, and that's not good for them. And they've awakened to that. Then, as a leader, you really have to take that into account. So you're either going to get forced to go in this direction, or you might as well just get ahead of it. And, change isn't easy. And the thing about working with a coach is that it makes it almost fun. I think change is wonderful. I think it's great fun, but not everybody enjoys it as much as it's like lawyers enjoying when things go wrong because they get to fix it. As coaches, we enjoy the growth, we enjoy the discomfort, we welcome that. And I think I think joining forces, coaches and leaders, we can help people get there faster.
So as a coach, I'd also like to agree that it is a fun process. So let's hope the coaches feel it as well. Excellent. Well, as you mentioned, we do want to leave time for some audience questions. So I'd like to invite everyone to be chatting in their questions, and we would be happy to take them.
Great. What a wonderful, wonderful insights. And I love the 5 fundamentals of humanity. They're so logical and make sense, but the quotes and information you have behind it, Meg, just brought them to life. So the first question is, if leaders have changed for the better during the pandemic, why is this great resignation occurring?
Yeah. So I think for those of you who've gone to coaching school, you'll remember the stages of readiness to change. And which is like pre-contemplation, no way, I'm not ready. Contemplation, maybe, maybe not. Preparation, I'm getting ready. I'm in action, or I'm maintaining it. Okay, so what I think we saw from this group is that there are more folks who've moved out of contemplation, like maybe I should be more humanistic, into action. But you still have a whole bunch of folks that are not there yet, right? It's not, that's the way change works. That's why organizational change is hard, because for many circumstances, 80% of people are not ready to change in any given moment. The pandemic was so disruptive that a bunch of people stepped over the bridge to the human-centered approach more than ever. And if not, the Great Resignation might be tenfold bigger, right? And so I think the way I view it, and this is not data driven, this is just based on, being with the energy of the times. I think that the leaders who haven't moved in this direction, and you read about lots of these case studies in the news, are the ones that are probably dealing with this more than others. So I think it's and if you're not sure that, I mean, you want to view that as a hypothesis, then I'd have a close look at which organizations are losing people, which kinds of roles. The fact that there's such a shortage of hourly workers right now, right? I mean, my Starbucks a block away is closed because there's not enough workers. We have no coffee on our main street anymore. And so those are not high quality jobs that people love, that that are growth promoting, where they self-actualize. So that's my suspicion, is that the leaders who have gotten the message are able to retain people and engage people, and the ones that are not are the ones that are going to be dealing with more and more resignations.
Great, thank you. Thanks for a detailed answer. That's terrific. Tammy asks, where can a coach get a framework or guidelines to implement this model?
Yes, well, I'll just refer you first to the report, because there are probably 60 or 70 underlying papers behind the report. So there's a lot there. So I'd start there. I mentioned the compassionate leadership paper. I wanted to cite a new paper in Leadership Quarterly on kind of an update on authentic leadership that's very valuable. So I would say start with there, because we did a lot of work, hundreds and hundreds of hours of pulling it all together. And then from there, go back to your coaching manuals and learnings, because we have plenty of that at the Institute. We've got lots and lots of published research translations, and you'll find there's a lot there. So I think the Institute's probably, and your original coaching learnings, just dusting them off and having a look, you'll realize it's all there. This humanistic coaching is humanistic. I remember learning from Bob Keegan, the famous constructed development, adult development psychologist at Harvard. He's now retired, and watching him in motion at one of our early coaching and leadership and healthcare conferences. And he had this way of this like bottomless empathy for the human condition. He could be with people who are dealing with things that you might judge as like, really, you're doing that? Like, absolutely no judgment. So the word unconditional regard is kind of a clumsy term, but when you were in his presence, it was real. Like you could feel the complete acceptance of you as a human with all the messiness. And when you start from there, then you can actually be tough because people know you love them. They know you care. And then you can actually inspire them, call them to grow, to step into the discomfort and grow. And so that's how I view coaching, is we create this deeply empathetic space, and then we lean in, because sometimes, especially leaders, have to be shaken a little bit to get the message, because they're so confident and they're so buttoned up, right? They've polished their identities to sparkling, and so you don't disrupt that very easily. So this I think that's the combination. It's the warmth, and then it's the deep, the real toughness that calls people to come on, get better. You can do better than this, and look, it'll be fun, and you will enjoy it, and it'll be great when you get there.
That's fascinating. Mother Teresa is another person who, when she was with you and you were in her presence, she had total focus and concentration on you and no one else. And that was one of her secrets to her success. Yeah. Hey, there's some more questions coming in. How does human-centered leadership look different, if at all, in a fully remote environment versus a hybrid environment?
Yeah. Oh, boy, I sigh with this because, I co-lead or lead 3 organizations, and we're all virtual. And I don't think we've had we had one in-person get together for the Institute in November. When we finished our conference, I had tears, just missing the fact that we weren't in the same room together. I felt the loss. And so I think we want to be, as soon as things open up and as soon as we've found our stride in whatever the new normal is, we got to get together when we can. I really think not every day, not every week even, but we've got to be together even once a year. So I think first I don't want to just abandon real world connection, because the embodied connection is, it's just not replaceable. We're human. I mean, we're not meant to Zoom all day. So I just want to hold that for human well-being, we need to be in physical spaces together. And so let's just look forward to that. And we've already, things have opened up in the last year. So we've already experienced that. Then after that, Zoom is awfully intimate. I mean, it's awfully intimate, right? If you're especially one-on-one, you're right, and so I think the opportunity for real rich connection, collaboration is really good. We did our conference virtually, and everybody raved about the fact that these amazing thought leaders were right in they're at their desk with them, and they felt much closer to them than they would if they were on a stage and the slides are way up on the screen. And so the Zoom, this virtual world can be really rich. And the last thing is to be intentional, to actually, as part of your business goals, make sure that making good relationships that make people want to stay, Howard, I know that's your theme, is something that you really engage in, and you make the time, you make the space, you check in with people, you go around the group, even though it might take 15 minutes, you get real check-ins, you laugh, you be together socially. So yeah, take care of the social connection. Make sure you get together in person when you can, and make the most out of the tools we have.
Thanks, Meg. That's very heartening to hear that, and to think positively that there will be times that we can be getting together once again. Just another question too. We only have a couple minutes left. Maybe this will be the last one. And let me just ask, what are some tips to encourage leaders to take a human-centered approach?
Well, I think I'll kind of recap some of the things that we've talked about.
Great.
Starting with self, as leaders, and I'm guilty of this too, I'm as much a workaholic as anybody, I think. I haven't outgrown that yet. And I think first we have to stop treating ourselves like machines, because we do. And we push ourselves to the limit, day after day after day. And everybody I know is working harder than they were working before because we don't have the break from travel. And so we filled up our calendars and we're doing more. So I think the first step is to notice that you're treating yourself as a machine and create space for rest, for family, for exercise, for enjoying life, so because if you're operating like a machine, you sound like one, you act like one, you look like one, you are, you're just in this bozo mode of, like getting things done. So I think you have to start there. It's being human, and appreciating that that's not vulnerable and it's not weak and it's not soft, it's real. And then from there, you can start attuning, being with people, just being with them without thinking for a few moments. I think that's just a place to start. Just start noticing. And then you'll start noticing, oh, that person's gone silent. Or, oh, so-and-so is a little, worried, or so you just start to know, or I'm a little stressed, or you just start noticing things. And then from there, you then can kind of get into the flow of working with that. So I think it's really starts with, self, and then you can bring that humanity to others.
That's so appreciative. Thank you. What a nice way to kind of summarize the session today, Meg. It's been delightful and truly enlightening hearing from you, hearing your information and results, and sharing your insights with the rest of us so that we can be better leaders during these challenging and troubling times.